Not only is the face of the franchise gone, but the temporary replacement for the face of the franchise gone at Penn State. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here. We got Tim Aiden on the line from SB Nation's Black Shoe Diaries. Tim, how you doing today?
Doing good, Mark. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. If it'll stop raining, we'll be in good shape. All right. Yeah, Tommy Stevens has been waiting in the wings for quite some time, has been utilized in the offense a number of ways. And obviously, way back when, after Christian Hackenberg, there was thought that he might take over as the starting quarterback. And again, has been utilized in the offense. And this was supposed to be his year, but he was injured and now replaced and gone.
Yeah, just earlier this week, Tommy Stevens entered the NCAA transfer portal, and then it was confirmed about a day later that he did, in fact, leave Penn State. So this isn't a case of someone just exploring their options only to come back to school. Because remember, just because a guy puts their name in the portal doesn't necessarily mean they're gone, but it sounds like he's no longer even enrolled at Penn State. And I, for one, I completely understand why he's doing what he's done. Sean Clifford, the guy who was originally going to be the backup to Stevens, he had a very strong spring. Looked good in the spring game. Like, I don't have the exact stats up, but he was something like 11 for 19 for maybe $150 and a touchdown. And he would have had more if not for a few drops from receivers in the beginning of the blue-white game. But he looked very good throwing the ball. Throws a nice, accurate, and a strong arm. And yes, I would say stronger than Trace. No knock on Trace. I say that. Doesn't have the scrambling ability of Trace, I should say. But he is, at the same time, he's not a statue. If need be, if the pocket collapses, if he sees an opening and thinks he can scramble for, several yards, he won't hesitate to do that. But he's not the kind of guy they're going to design runs for, if that's what you're thinking of. So a little different from Trace and Tommy in that way. But yeah, it's time for Sean Clifford to take the bull by the horns, which I'm not saying he wasn't doing that before, but now he's definitely the guy who will start about a year earlier than the fan base projected. People thought he was going to be the starter in 2020 once Tommy Stevens' year was up, but now that gets bumped up a year. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Him there with the offensive line having to replace Ryan Bates and Connor McGovern, who left early for the NFL draft. And then you've got also going to have a three-headed rotation at running back between Ricky Slade, Journey Brown, and true freshman Noah Payne, who had a pretty strong spring game. We can get more into that later, perhaps, if we have time. But it's so the offense that we thought we were going to see in 2019, suddenly it's going to have a different look to it. Whether that ends up being a good or a bad thing, time will tell. But definitely a breaking situation. As far as Tommy's where he's going to end up, we have no idea yet. Apparently, he's been following a lot of Mississippi State's coaching staff, on Twitter, where Joe Moorhead is a head coach, which certainly makes sense to me. But I think it's a matter of Tommy. He saw the writing on the wall. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to participate much in spring practice because he was coming off surgery from an injury he suffered during last season. And this is a kid who's been injured several times throughout his career at Penn State. And Clifford obviously having a really strong spring. It basically created a situation where James Franklin just could not just anoint Tommy the starter. He had to have a legitimate competition because Sean Clifford was playing that well. They couldn't just hand the job to anyone in particular. I think Tommy realized, he'd be taking a huge gamble sticking around at Penn State when the prospects of him winning the job were 50-50. I think he wants to go somewhere where, I'm not saying he's going to get the job handed to him wherever he goes, but I think he's looking to go somewhere where the odds of him, he's got better than 50-50 odds of winning the starting job because he's only got one more year left, and Yeah, he's never been a full-time starter. He's got to put something on tape to show, NFL scouts. So so I completely understand the situation. I wish it worked out for him here, but just like in life, things don't always go on the field the way you hope they will.
No question about that. As we mentioned off the top, Tommy Stevens did just about everything a little bit here and there for the Penn State offense over the past 3 seasons, where he threw 41 passes in relief of Trace McSorley, 4 touchdowns and a pick, 24 of 41. Ran for over 500 yards in various formations where they got him the football, and obviously out at the quarterback position, and 8 touchdowns rushing to receiving, 14 catches. So again, they moved him around and got him on the field a number of times in some situations to get him the football and keep him active and then ready to replace Trace McSorley, but it didn't turn out. No, as you mentioned, Sean Clifford, 8th rated pro prospect, pro style quarterback, I should say, coming out of high school, out of Xavier in Cincinnati, 7th rated player overall in Ohio in 2017. We got Tim Aiden on the line from SB Nation's Black Shoe Diaries to talk Penn State football. Blue and white game is in the rearview mirror, and that, of course, being last Saturday. So as you look at it, based on what you saw on the field on the Big Ten Network, or if you were right there, I don't know, Tim, last Saturday, and then also in regards to just kind of the storylines throughout the spring, what do you think got accomplished? What stood out to you?
If we're talking strictly from the spring game, what stuck out to me was the play of Noah Kane. True freshman running back, 4-star kid out of IMG Academy. Penn State beat out Texas for his services, but he's come in with this. He went in with the attitude of I'm gonna be the guy. I mean, just and he showed that he I mean, stat wise, you look at it's like 12 carries for 45. I don't have the stats in front of me, but he didn't exactly light up the stat sheet, but he would always find way to fall forward, pick up those few yards. He had great patience behind his blockers and would didn't dance around too much. He just looked very smooth carrying the ball, and he could also plow over people. So he's not really a speed guy, but he's definitely got that power and agility that you like to see in running backs. And it sounds from reading the comments of Javon Sider, the running backs coach, that Kane's gonna be a part of the rotation. It's gonna be a 3-person rotation. It sounds like between him and Ricky Slade, the presumed starter at this point, and Journey Brown, who's more of a speedy type guy I guess he's been having a very strong spring and is pushing Slade for the starting job. But it sounds like Slade's a starter for now, but there's going to be quite a bit of shuffling going on, I think. And I think that's how the staff would prefer it. I know in the past they've been, last year it was Miles Sanders. A couple years before that it was Saquon Barkley. They just had one feature back that they would use. But I think going forward, they prefer more of a, I guess you call it platoon, for lack of a better word, system for the running backs. So that was one thing that stuck out to me. Also, it's Mitra Gross-Matos, that D line looked pretty fierce overall. And I've been reading nothing but glowing reports about them during spring. And there's even I was searching for it. Franklin had a quote. He mentioned somehow this is the best defensive line that he's seen in his 24 years of coaching. And so now I know we don't want to always put stock into when a coach says this is the best I've ever seen. I mean, put all your stock into it, but it is a comment that makes you raise an eyebrow when you see that. And so if that's the case, then I mean that is great news for Penn State going forward, because I think looking back in the past couple of years, some of those, unfortunately, they built a reputation a bit for, blowing fourth quarter leads, and part of that reason they've blown these leads is the lack of ability to get pressure on the quarterback late in the game because the D line is gassed or lacking fresh bodies to throw around. So that if they've got a strong rotation of defensive linemen, I can definitely perhaps make a difference in some of those closer games they may end up finding themselves in later on. So those are two things that stuck out to me the most. Brandon Smith also looked pretty strong. He's an early enrollee, as you know, former 5-star recruit out of Virginia. He's Virginia's Gatorade Player of the Year for 2019. And so he early enrollee, so he got a chance to play in the blue-white game, and he looked pretty impressive. He had a pass breakup. I think he had 6 tackles overall. So he's going to be a part of the rotation. Not going to get started, but he will factor into the rotation. Him and Lance Dixon, the other early enrollee freshman, who also did fine. So I think the linebacker position also is going to look much more. It's a much more rosier outlook than it was just a year ago.
Yeah, Brandon Smith rated number 1 on the inside of the linebacking unit coming out of high school, and the top-rated player in what is typically a football-rich state in Virginia. So a very talented get for Penn State. And, of course, Noah Cain, you referenced him and really talked about him in detail. 6th-rated running back coming out of high school, 13th rated overall player in Florida, and Florida's top 80 or 100 players are all 4 stars at least. So really good signs for Penn State when you look at 2 of their top recruits coming through and playing well in the spring against the big boys. And you talk about the defensive line, and in reviewing James Franklin's coaching career, best defensive line, well, he hasn't necessarily coached at stops that you would think feature just all-time line play on the defensive side like in Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, or anything like that. But at the same time, Kansas State for 2 years when they were really, really good back around 2006, 2007. Of course, his Vandy defenses were good. But other than that, if he extends that to NFL play, he was with the Packers for 1 year as wide receivers coach. So if he was looking across at the defensive line and he's really on the up and up with the comment, then it's speaking volumes. But like you say, I'm sure he's just trying to make a point that this is a really good defensive line, and they haven't had this much talent or ability or probably experience, production, all of it put together since he's been there at Penn State. We got Tim Aiden on the line from SB Nation's Black Shoe Diaries talking about the Nittany Lions following the blue and white game. In regards to recruiting, we mentioned Noah Cain and Brandon Smith being the next wave. What could possibly be the very next wave in looking at 2020?
So won't go into the entire class, but during Blue White weekend, they picked up 2 more commitments. One of them being R.J. Adams, 3-star offensive guard out of Woodbridge, Virginia. Woodbridge is in a spot, also the same high school where Ricky Slade played at. So I know Woodbridge is an area they've been hitting quite a bit, Northern Virginia area in general. So that's part of that DMV region, DC, Maryland, Virginia. Penn State has a huge presence in recruiting wise. So he definitely gives them another, key pickup on the offensive line. Probably the surprise commits was Cole Brevard, 4-star defensive tackle out of Indiana. He's number 1 rated player in the state of Indiana and number 20th rated defensive tackle overall in the 24/7 rankings. And as you may know, Brian Bresci, the number 1 overall player in the 24/7 rankings. Last I checked, also defensive tackle. Penn State was in the mix for him for a while. It sounds though as if everything's trending Clemson's direction, according to Crystal Balls, and Bresci's supposed to announce his commitment, I believe, in a few days. So I'd be surprised at this point if it's anyone other than Clemson for Bresci. So getting Brevard is probably the next best thing to getting a guy like Bresci. As I mentioned before, Penn State needs, could always use some more fierce defensive linemen, especially to help preserve late leads. So it's a really great pickup, to cap off the spring practice sessions. So, and currently they're because of those commitments now, they're ranked 8th overall in the 24/7 recruiting rankings for 2020 thus far, and they have the number 2 class in the Big Ten after Ohio State. So that's about all on the recruiting front for now. They're in the mix for several other guys, but that's probably for another recording session to talk about.
Yeah, Brevard is a top 20 tackle, and you mentioned, of course, and run through the commitment of R.J. Adams, a number 21 guard, according to 247 Sports Composite, number 11 out of the state of Virginia overall. 2 really good gets, top 20 position players at their particular spots. Tim Aiden talking Penn State football. We'll talk the next wave when we talk recruiting. Of course, the guys coming in, and then we've got the guys leaving, and 2019 at the NFL draft, not necessarily projected to be a stellar class of Penn State players moving on to the NFL, but still for a team that has been in the top 10 in the nation 2 consecutive years after the Rose Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl, and then top 15 or so last year. Of course, there's quite a bit of talent to move on. Of course, Trace McSorley's the guy that's the franchise, the face, and the most popular and most well-known player by far. But this is how the system and the process works. That's because that's a byproduct of him being a really good college player and him playing quarterback. But there's lesser-known players who are much better NFL prospects.
Trace does want to be an NFL quarterback, and time will tell if his dream doesn't come true. I honestly, I've not looked much at mock drafts or looked at where he's projected to go, if he's projected to be drafted. So I'm really not going to offer my thoughts on that. I'm just curious to see if he gets drafted and to where. I know he's worked out of the Giants the other week, so it would be quite interesting if he was reunited with his old teammate Saquon Barkley up there in New York. Right, it looks as if Miles Sanders and Amani Oruwari are the two favorites to get picked first, for Penn Staters. I think they're both second-round projections. Last I saw, I know Miles is for sure. He even at one point, I think Miles was projected late first round. But I think these days, and the NFL becoming a more pass-happy league, and if running backs having such a short shelf life and not as strongly valued as they once were, I think. Unless you got a Saquon type waiting in the wings, usually running backs tend to go either later first round or second round. So then it's not like Miles is projected early second round. So, he'll be a strong pickup for whichever team takes him. So I think a guy, get him the right team, they can ease him in to some playing time. And, you never know. You see all these guys who played at lower division levels I'm thinking off the top of my head, Danny Woodhead with the Patriots, guys who didn't even play D1 end up being the starting, running back at some point. So, if he just, the kid seems to have a great work ethic from all I've read about. So if he just, just keeps grinding, I'm sure he will get his fair shake, and I hope he tears it up in the league. Yeah, and as far as I know, also Connor McGovern and Ryan Bates, 2 offensive linemen left early. I think they're projected in the 3rd. I know McGovern's projected as high as 3rd round, but it sounds like it's more like a 4th, 5th rounder. And Bates, I've seen around 6th, 7th round. So it'll be interesting to see where those two end up. Also, let's see if there's a couple other names on there that I'm forgetting. Again, I haven't paid too much attention to the NFL draft stuff this year, so it's probably about all I feel, comfortable talking about.
Very good, Tim. I know that a few sites kind of like Sharif Miller as a possible.
Right, Sharif Miller. I had a brain fart there. Yeah, Sharif Miller. I think I saw him as, I think he's like a mid-round guy, but he'll be I think he could definitely make a living as a pass rushing specialist at the next level. So that kind of became his specialty at Penn State. So I think he'll be a nice addition to whichever team takes him.
Sharif Miller, very productive at Penn State in the role that Tim just outlined, getting after the quarterback with 15 tackles for loss just last season, 7.5 sacks, all-time at Penn State. He's got to rank among the all-time leaders, I got to think, in tackles for loss with 31.5 and 14.5 quarterback sacks. Tim Aiden talking Penn State football has wrapped up the spring for us. Got us set with recruiting in terms of the latest updates of 2 top 20 players at their positions coming in, and now the NFL draft. Tim, you have covered the gamut. We appreciate you stopping by.
Sure thing, Mark.